So we've had the Battle of Gettysburg. Lee's army is definitely weakened. He's lost a lot of men. Everybody, they've been in war for a long time. They've lost people. They're tired. So Lee is starting to wear down. And at the same time, we know McClellan has been replaced. And now they have General Grant. And he's not gonna hang around and waste time. He's gonna act. He's gonna be fast. He won't retreat. He's kind of similar to Lee in the way that he's gonna go for it. He's here to win. He wants the Union to be successful. He's not messing around like the other Union generals have been. So that is going to, we know Lee is weakened, and now the Union's going to be strengthened because they're under General Grant. So the Union Army under Grant, they leave. They are going to meet Lee, and Grant takes about 120,000 soldiers with him. And they meet somewhere between Washington, D.C. and Richmond. So in the place they meet is called the Wilderness. So Grant has about 120,000 men. Lee's got about 60,000. So he's only got about half as many soldiers as the Union does. So that's already a big disadvantage that he has, Grant has 2 people for his every one. Then they meet at the Wilderness and there's a battle, and it's pretty ugly. About 30,000 people die. But so normally what we've seen in the past battles is whoever the Union Army general, whoever their leader is, when that happens, they back up, they retreat. Well, Grant's not going to. Grant, even though this battle's been rough, they've lost men, he's not going anywhere. He's not backing down. And so originally they were going to meet in Richmond. That's where Grant is heading. That's where, because remember, Richmond is the capital of the Confederacy. So Grant marches on. He's still going. So then, Lee has to do the same because they're going to their capital. So they're going to Richmond, Virginia. Well, Petersburg, Virginia is south of Richmond. It's just below it. And Grant thought, Petersburg could be my ticket to ending the war. There could be something big here. So Grant knows that Petersburg is going to be in the way, that Lee's not going to be able to get to Richmond without going through Petersburg. So he sets siege to Petersburg and surrounds it from June of one year to March of the next year. So for 9 months, they're surrounding Petersburg. They're cutting off all supplies. They've dug trenches so that Lee's army cannot get through. They can't get from Richmond. He stopped them from getting to Richmond from Petersburg. So they're kind of stuck. They're getting hungry. They're agitated. They need supplies. So Grant knew what he was doing. He thought, if I get them hungry enough, they'll surrender. So all of this is going on in Virginia, which is kind of the northernmost part of the Confederacy, of the South. So it's still in the South, but it's up near the Union and near the North. Well, down south, we have General Sherman, and he is marching his troops through Tennessee. They go through Alabama, they go through Georgia, they go through South Carolina, they move into North Carolina, and he's just going through, he's wreaking havoc, he's defeating them. He gets Atlanta falls to him, so he wins at Atlanta in Georgia. He takes over Savannah, Georgia. Then he goes into South Carolina, he goes into North Carolina, and General Johnston of the Confederate Army finally surrenders his army to Sherman in May of 1865. So down in the lower part of the South, they've surrendered. They're like, we can't handle it, we don't have the manpower, you win. So while all this is going on, we've got Grant and Lee up in Virginia. We now had Sherman and Johnston down in the South. All these battles are going on, and at the time, President Lincoln's up for re-election. So remember our old buddy McClellan, who was not a very good leader. He could think things out, but he couldn't put them into action. Well, he was a little bit bitter that Lincoln replaced him. So he decided, well, fine, you took my job, I'm going to take yours. So McClellan ran against Lincoln for president. Obviously, he didn't win. Lincoln got reelected. So it's not over. We've had the Emancipation Proclamation. We've had lots of battles, but the Civil War is still going on. But it seems like there might be an end in sight. Sherman got the Confederate Army to surrender. Surely something. Grant's got to be successful, is what we're thinking. So Lee's realizing that he is trapped. He's outmanned. It's not looking good. So he gets a message to Richmond, to the president of the Confederacy, President Davis, to evacuate Richmond. Get everybody out. Get them out. So while that's happening, somehow Lee and his army escaped Petersburg. Well, he didn't know that Johnston had already surrendered, so he was hoping that they could meet back up. Didn't happen. But Grant kind of knew it. He kind of anticipated it. So he sent a bunch of his men to set a trap for the Confederates. It was a small, really small town in southern Virginia. And he knew what Lee was going to try and do. He knew that Lee was going to try and escape and that he was going to try and go south to catch up with the rest of his troops. So he set a trap. Well, Lee realized that he couldn't win, that he'd been beat. And so he officially surrendered on April 9th, 1865. And so after Lee surrendered, Grant let all the Confederate soldiers, they could go home, they could go back to their families, they could go back to their lives, but they had to promise to never fight against the United States again. And so with that, the war was officially over. So just 5 days after Lee surrendered and the war was officially over, President Lincoln was at Ford's Theater, and there was a play called Our American Cousin that he was seeing. And John Wilkes Booth was a man who was really upset that the South had lost, and he blamed President Lincoln for it. And so he assassinated President Lincoln. He shot him in the back of the head, and he jumped from his balcony seat. He broke his leg. He ended up getting caught. So 5 days after, President Lincoln's entire presidency was pretty much civil war and ending slavery. And as soon as it happened, Lee surrendered, Civil War's over, we can go back, we're back to being, the Union, trying to be unified. President Lincoln lived for 5 days after that.